Welcome to I Hate James Dobson, the fun we have between the panic attacks.
That's the one.
Welcome to I Hate James Dobson, your bi-weekly trauma-bonded parasocial relationship.
No, that's the one.
I like that one. Welcome to I Hate James Dobson. My name is Jake, an evangelical turned queer sex therapist, and I'm joined, as always, by the hilarious, hardworking, and harmonious Brooke. Hallelujah.
Hello.
Brooke, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I've been better. We just finished a 2-hour episode.
Yeah.
And my notes next is other witty banter.
Oh, other witty banter?
Yeah. So
Shit, that's probably my job.
no, it's really mine.
What's the date today?
Uh,
November.
It's
It's mid-November, right?
it's November 11th.
Oh, okay.
Happy Veterans Day.
Happy Veterans Day. And
Oh my God. Shout out, Dad.
Do you have some Thanksgiving plans?
Yes, I'm going to go visit boyfriend's family.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Have you met them?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I wouldn't say we're cool with each other. That's too strong. We're pretty cool with each other.
Okay.
Do you have any Thanksgiving plans?
Probably by now I do. I hope. You know what? My friends and I, every year, the night before Thanksgiving, we go to the same bar that we only go to on that night.
Oh,
They buy extra whiskey because they know we're coming.
nice.
They're cash only, which is so irritating.
Oh,
Because what is cash?
I love that.
You do?
Yeah.
I never have cash.
Oh, I was good at, I used an ATM before, but just I don't know, makes it feel like, yeah, we're just here for tonight. No one needs to know what happens.
So I probably will be doing that. I don't know yet what I'll be doing for Thanksgiving proper, but I'm sure it'll be great. Eating turkey somewhere. Do you like turkey?
I'm more of a ham person myself. Turkey's fine.
What does ham have to do with turkey?
That's what I eat typically on Thanksgiving instead.
You have ham?
Mm-hmm.
And turkey?
It's on the table.
That's what I mean. Like, there's ham and turkey being served?
Yeah.
What are you, a millionaire?
No, I'm autistic. Turkey's too dry for me.
Okay,
Then you have it with the gravy. Sure, whatever.
No, that's not what I was going to say.
Okay.
Turkey's not always that dry.
My family gets honey baked ham
Yeah.
from typically a honey baked ham store because apparently they make those now, and it's delicious.
Wow. Have you ever hosted Thanksgiving and made the meal?
No.
I have. One time.
One time?
Yeah.
Just the once?
Well, when you do it once,
Uh-huh.
that's all you need.
How many people were there?
There were there were a lot. There was like
Anything more than 5, I'll be very impressed.
Oh, it was like 12 or 14.
Whoa.
So when I grew up, Thanksgiving was the holiday because I don't know if it's been mentioned on this podcast, but I'm not religious.
Mm-hmm.
So Christmas was just like a fun thing you do. But Thanksgiving was like the real deal, right?
Interesting.
And my mom would host Orphan Thanksgiving, which was where like anyone who couldn't get home would just come over. So to me, in my brain, Thanksgiving is like 20 to 30 people.
Wow.
And it's a big party and you have a ton of food and 2 turkeys or 3 turkeys. Like,
Wow.
yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I hosted and it was great. And I made the turkey and it was incredible. And it was not dry. Sorry, Janet.
Jenna makes fine turkey. It's just not my meat. And I'm all about my meat. I'm all about my biblical manhood.
No, put that in the grave. We're not there anymore. Wait.
Put that in the gravy.
No, but no biblical manhood. Well, I have a photo of my turkey.
Uh-huh.
And I'm hearing you, I promise, when you say that you don't like turkey. But also, I want you to just maybe see this one turkey really quick, okay?
That does look very pretty. I like the way that it looks. It looks like it'd be really good, tasty meat.
It was juicy.
I bet.
Yeah.
Did you fist it with anything?
Yeah, lemon and some other junk. And my brother, who was a chef at the time, gave me really good turkey making advice, which is, I think he said, butter the shit out of it, put it in the oven and leave it alone.
Nice.
And that is what I did.
That sounds like really good advice.
Oh, thanks, brother.
So, reader, you should know we are recording this blog before we know the results of the presidential election.
Yeah.
And therefore, we have no idea what the vibe is.
So sorry if we sound happy or
too sad.
Or too sad.
Yeah. It makes it very difficult. It makes it very difficult to plan an episode of a podcast that's based on reliving trauma to know exactly how deep or not to go. So
yeah. Sorry.
So I figured we should do a relatively light and relatively timeless episode.
Yeah.
Our book today is one of Dobson's earliest works. Published originally in 1978, the same year as The Strong-Willed Child, this book is a much less sordid history. However, still Dobson. The book was updated and reprinted a number of times. The version we are reading from came out in 2006.
Here it comes. It's coming out of the backpack.
Get ready to talk about wet dreams and periods, because today we're talking about preparing for adolescence.
Oh, no. Oh, no. Can I see the cover?
Absolutely.
Okay. Oh, yeah, there's a lot of tabs.
There's not as many tabs this time.
There's just some dirty Converse.
Oh, no. No.
Denim jeans.
Fuck.
Jake's wearing this right now.
This blog is done and I will never come back. I'm deleting any trace from it from the internet.
Oh no, the back is my look. 2 different socks. Oh no. You know what's funny? You can cut this. It says gospel light, like the light of Jesus, but it makes me think of like gospel light.
It has the Splenda.
Just a little gospel. Oh, they're really Converse. Did they get a deal with Converse? It's like on every page.
Yeah, it's the little pictures in them. I don't know.
Oh, Converse should sue them.
So this episode is very much a return to form. We're not doing any 4-part series talking about the history and political implications. Just 2 people going chapter by chapter through a bad book, making fun of some old assholes who tell kids about boners and body hair. I write a thesis for every episode that we do. I don't normally state it. It's just like to keep me relatively centered. This is me centered, everybody. But the thesis for this book, I think, will be useful. Even when Dobson is giving neutral medical and relationship advice, he is weird as fuck about it. And all of the Dobson slop we're used to seeing sits right under the surface. His folksy charm is turned up to an 11. So we're really just going to go chapter by chapter and just list out some of the highlights. It starts with an introduction called Let's Huddle, which is an extended metaphor about being on a football team. Talking about, like, if you have a youngster, quote, if you have a youngster in the pre-adolescent age, you should capitalize on this final coaching session prior to the big game. You must take the occasion to refresh his memory, provide last-minute instructions, and offer any necessary words of caution. But beware, if you let this fleeting moment escape unnoticed, you may never get another opportunity.
What? When they're 10?
Yeah.
That's it?
Yep. That's the only time you have to prepare them for puberty.
Even though we know adolescence goes into like the mid-20s, but that's fine.
Yeah, don't worry about it. He actually is very specifically doesn't say that.
Yeah.
Quote, throughout this book, I'll be talking primarily to the preteens who we hope will remember what they've learned in practice and who will sometimes feel that they're alone out there on the field. So again, really, really torturing this metaphor. Yeah. But the audience is preteens. So he's not talking to adults. And so that's why a lot of the folksiness is just turned up to an 11. He's trying to be cool and relatable, which cool. It's specifically for boys and girls between 10 and 15 years of age and is expressed in a language they can understand. Dobson, chapter 1.
There we go.
The Secret of Self-Esteem. He loves long, tortured metaphors in this book. Like, he does this multiple times. So in this one, he calls it the Dark Canyon. Let's begin by playing a mental game for a moment. Imagine yourself driving alone down the highway in a small car. You've just gotten through a little town by the name of Puberty, but now you're back on the main highway, and over to the right you see a sign that says Adultsville, 8 years straight ahead. They're clipping along at 55 miles an hour, heading for this great new city you've heard so much about, but as you round a curve, you suddenly see a man waving a red flag, holding up a warning sign. He motions for you to stop as quickly as possible, so you jam on the brakes and skid to a halt in front of the flagman. He comes over to the window of your car and says, "Friend, I've come with some very important news for you. A bridge has collapsed about 1 mile down the road, leaving a huge drop-off into a dark canyon. If you're not careful, you'll drive your car right off the cliff, tumble down into the canyon, and of course, if you do that, you'll never get to Adultsville. This is a truncated version of the metaphor.
Woof.
This metaphor goes on for some time. This is at the end, quote, "Now let me explain the meaning of this story.
Oh, thanks.
The automobile you're driving represents you.
Oh.
It has your name on the door, and you see, I am the flagman waving down the road." In case you don't know how metaphors work, I feel like even for like 10-year-olds, it's a little bit insulting to their intelligence.
Yeah.
Here's this very obvious metaphor. And let me take a step back and explain this very obvious metaphor. It's also not a particularly good one, and he comes back to it throughout this chapter. Whatever. I don't think he's a good writer.
What?
I don't think he's a good writer.
You don't?
I don't.
Oh my god.
I know it's shocking news. It contradicts everything I've said before.
But he has 43,000 books.
He has so many books. And some of them he's even written himself. This whole chapter is about inferiority. We've talked about this a lot in Dobson's work, but he really looks at inferiority as central to understanding human psychology and especially psychopathology. Any like disorder, anytime people do weird stuff, he relates it back to inferiority. And although he rejects the label of being a Freudian therapist and Freudian psychologist, he absolutely is one. He's more Adlerian. Adler is a student of Freud. This doesn't matter to anyone who's listening. But, like Jordan Peterson, Dobson largely focuses these conversations around the internal. You just need to clean your room, etc. We do have agency, of course, and some level of cognitive behavioral therapy in helping people change their mindset can be really helpful, as we talked about last episode, especially regarding self-esteem. But he ignores the systemic factors, especially the ones that he perpetuates. There is no self-analysis or larger systemic working, just don't be insecure. Mm-hmm. Don't worry about it. As young people grow up in our society, there are 3 things that teenagers feel they must have in order to feel good about themselves. Brooke, what 3 things do you think teenagers must have in order to feel good about themselves?
I think they must have...
These are not physical objects.
Oh, right. So, like, iPhones isn't one of them.
Yeah.
I think 3 things teenagers must have to feel good about themselves are, like, an adult who cares about them. Some kind of, like, meaning or, like starting to build a value system or like finding things that are meaningful to them. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe this will be controversial, but maybe like social interactions, like friends.
Wow, those are 3 really good, beautiful answers. And they're not at all what Dobson says. What? Dobson says physical attractiveness, feeling smart, and money.
Money. Wait, what was the question again?
As young people grow up in our society, there are 3 things they feel they must have in order to feel good about themselves.
Money. Okay, and physical attractiveness and feeling smart.
80% of teenagers, he says, don't like the way that they look. 80%. Sure. The feelings of being dumb often begin very early in school when they might have trouble learning. Yeah? And money, this financial problem is not as common now as it used to be, simply because today people have more of the necessities of life. However, some families still live in poverty, and those children can't afford to be like their friends, sometimes feel inferior because they are poor.
Oh, he's walking us a thin little rope here, Dobby.
I guess. This feels very like middle-class white people problems.
Yeah.
Which is really the unstated audience for this book.
Yeah.
Steps to address your insecurity. 1, recognize that you're not alone. There are a lot of other kids in the suburb who must feel some sort of type of way.
I can't. I'm going home.
Face your problems. There's some decent advice in this, but list all the things you don't like about yourself. Write down everything that has been bothering you. Even admit the characteristics that you dislike, including the tendency to get mad or blow up. And then work on those things.
Oh.
Sure.
Great. So I'm supposed to write down a list of everything I don't like about myself and then work on it.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Just wanted to make sure I understood that. Great.
Mm-hmm. Find a true friend, one that you can talk to you about your feelings, which actually isn't horrible advice, especially for, boys going through adolescence when they're really learning through Dobson stuff to like not be gay and talk about their feelings. Talk about your feelings with people.
Right.
Take your list of unsolvable problems to a private place with or a small filer will not be dangerous. Then burn that paper as a symbol to God that the problems are now his. That's not horrible advice.
No, that's actually very witchy for Dobson.
It is very witchy. That's my next note. I did a similar thing one time on a youth group, men's quote unquote retreat. Men because we were like 12, but we like wrote down like things we wanted God to move in us, and then give them to God and put them in a fire. That kind of ritual can be really helpful for people psychologically.
Sure.
Does feel very witchy though.
Yeah, it's witchy. What if Dobson took a real like turn and was like, start practicing paganism, Wicca?
That'd be so funny. I'd be here for it. Honestly, Dobson, you got time left. You're still alive.
Let's have a Josh Harris move and turn this ship around.
Hell yeah.
Joshua Harris.
Joshy boy. Step 3, compensate for your weakness. Pick up a hobby. Find something that you are good at or enjoy doing and work on that. That's also not bad advice.
Nope.
And 4, have genuine friends. People that aren't going to like talk shit behind your back and that you can trust. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Most of this book is not horrible advice. There's a part at the end that we're going to talk to that gets a little bit weird and wonky, but a note about inferiority for me. I generally agree that when people feel bad about themselves, they project that out onto the world, and it really distorts their ability to function in the world. That's a real thing. But evangelicalism is founded explicitly on self-hate. You are a sinner, a wretch, undeserving of even the smallest crumb of kindness and grace. But God found it deep in his heart to love a poor and fortunate soul, like yourself. There are ways this narratives aren't destructive, but I have rarely seen a group as inherently and explicitly founded on self-loathing like evangelicals. The only exception perhaps being online leftists, while clearly operating with a weird sense of white guilt.
Yeah.
Just like this like self-flagellation. When I was growing up in the church, the phrase, love your neighbor as yourself, confused me because I hated myself. And because that's what I thought was God wanted from me. That's what I thought was taught. This like, I am horrible. I despise my own creation. Without God, I was worse than trash. So yes, inferiority and low self-esteem is important, but look in the mirror, my guy. That's chapter 1. Chapter 2, everybody's doing it. Chapter about peer pressure. He does another pretty tortured metaphor. He's told this story before. I think it was in Bringing Up Girls. There's a number of things that are repeated from other works that he's done. But in this one, he's telling the story where he was at a new staff orientation at a hospital. In a group of 12 people, he was the only guy. All of the women wanted coffee, but felt pressure to conform. So Dobson was the brave warrior who openly said he wanted coffee, and then everyone followed suit.
Wow.
And everybody clapped.
What a leader.
And literally, I have half a page of quotes just from that story that I'm not going to read because it doesn't matter. But you like these, he spends most of his time telling stories that are not well told.
No.
He goes from that story into another story. This is a real one, though, an experiment where people were in a classroom and instructors were held up 2 or 3 different lines to say which one's shorter, and the class had to vote. But everyone except for one person was an actor, and they were told to give the wrong instructions. So it was actually a study in peer pressure.
Yeah.
And most people went along with the group despite very clearly seeing that one is incorrect. Unless there was another person in the room, in which case the odds of them picking the correct answer went up significantly. He tells that story in far too much detail. Power of a friend, quote, if you have even one friend who will stand with you against the group, you will probably have more courage too. But when you're by yourself, it's pretty difficult to stand alone. Why do we need other people to take these stands? Well, the answer to these questions goes back to the subject of inferiority. You see, when you feel worthless and foolish, then you are more frightened by the threat of ridicule or rejection by your friends. Sure. Goes into a third story in this chapter.
Oh my God.
These stories are so long and unnecessary, so I've put together a couple of different quotes, but these are all quotes from him. There are about 60 teens in this choir that I saw, and they were singing the Battle Hymn of the Republic. One girl in the front row became so emotional, which I don't think is what happened, that she fainted.
From the battle what?
Battle Hymn of the Republic.
Can you, what? I know you can't.
Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. That one. So emotional from that she fainted.
Okay.
I think it's because her knees were locked.
Yeah, probably.
The director saw her fall, but he didn't want to wreck the performance, so he continued to lead his choir.
What?
Several adults gathered around the unconscious girl and helped her regain her senses. However, when that young lady passed out, the possibility of fainting was planted in 59 other impressionable heads. By the time the choir reached the final phrase, 20 kids lay flat on their backs. That is conformity at its peak.
Wait, I have something to tell you. This is Dobson saying this?
Yeah.
Okay. Because how many evangelical videos have you seen of people getting cured, falling down, speaking in tongues?
Like a charismatic church. Yeah.
Exactly. And it is exactly this.
Yes.
This is how that happens. You see 5 people doing it and you're like, that could probably happen to me, and now you're doing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
These things you're highly influential and highly sort of contagious. And on a sadder note, this often happens with teens when there's like a suicide at a school.
Yeah, cluster suicide is a
thing.
thing.
Yeah. But I love that Dobson just like proved something that happens like in churches and like.
No, but that's the Holy Spirit. That's different.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Conformity. He's all about conformity.
Yes. That is a note that I have a little bit later, but there's no place that I felt more pressure to conform than the evangelical church.
Yes.
Also, I can't prove that any of these things are happening. I do know that one study he cites is a real thing. Although he doesn't cite it. He just talks about it. He doesn't give a citation. But this one feels a little bit like jumping the shark with metaphors. Like 20 people passed out because they saw one person pass out and it got planted in their minds of a possibility.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
He does a little bit of like disability, like fetishizing. There's the pain of the handicap. In the high school where I served as a counselor, for example, there was a blind student who couldn't accept the fact that she was different from other students. Her way of dealing with her blindness was to deny that it existed.
What?
She felt such pressure to conform that she just pretended she wasn't blind.
No.
Or...
I'm laughing at Dobson. I just want everyone to know.
Yeah.
That's... Okay, sure.
The Daily Gloves is a story of a black kid who wore gloves and long clothes to cover up his blackness. Quote, when Jeff wore a long-sleeve shirt, trousers, shoes, and socks, the only part of his skin that he could see was his hands. By wearing those gloves, Jeff couldn't see his own black hands. His black skin certainly didn't make him feel inferior, but it made him feel unusual, because he was the only non-white child in the room. But again, Dobson doesn't get into the implications of systemic racism, just he felt weird. There are 2 parts to round out this chapter. God's view of conformity, he quotes Romans 12:2, which is quoted all the fucking time. Do not conform to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is good and acceptable and perfect in the will of God. There's a Christian brand, mostly clothing brand, called Not of This World that comes from this. Oh. And I was obsessed with them at the time. I think I still, in my parents' house, have a sticker of theirs. But that's a big thing. Don't be of this world.
Oh, yeah.
This chapter ends with yet another story. He labels it the courage of a Christian.
The Kurds?
Yes, the courage of a Christian. The courage of a Christian.
Oh.
I heard the true story of a young man who was very courageous. After graduating from high school, he entered a state university near his home. During the first few weeks of class, a godless professor asked his class if any students considered themselves to be Christians. It was obvious that the professor intended to embarrass anyone who raised his hand. The young man looked around and saw that none of the 200 students was going to admit his faith. What should he do? He either had to admit his Christianity or deny it, like Peter did when Jesus was about to be crucified. He suddenly held up his hand and said, "Yes, I am a Christian." The professor made him stand up in front of the class and said, "How could you be so stupid to believe that God became a man and lived on the earth? That's ridiculous. Besides, I read the Bible, and it didn't say a single thing to me." The young man looked right at the professor and said, "Sir, the Bible is God's letter to Christians. If you didn't understand it, that's what you get for reading somebody else's mail." So first of all, it absolutely did not happen.
No.
Second of all, we will do an episode on a movie at some point. But this is literally the plot of a movie called God's Not Dead.
Okay.
the whole premise is a professor makes people write down God is dead, and one student says, actually, God's not dead.
Oh.
He's surely alive, and he's living on the inside roaring like a lion, which is a music quote. Sure, Dobson. That's 4 extended stories in one chapter somewhat related to the topic.
Yikes.
That's his way of trying to be folksy with people.
He loves to be folksy.
But at least it's not actively harmful.
Okay.
We're going to skip chapter 3. We're going to talk about that one at the end. Chapter 4, I Think I've Fallen in Love. Dobson, the relational therapist. Quote, the subject of romantic love may not be very interesting to you right now. You may even think that it's rather silly. However, unless you are a very unusual person, you are likely to become extremely attracted to members of the opposite sex in the years immediately ahead.
Oh, wait. Okay. I caught it. Unless you're a very unusual person.
So queer, like gay people, lesbians, catching strays. Also asexual people catching strays.
Yeah.
The ecstasy of love is the next section. And it is, once again, an extended parable. It starts with this. There's no feeling in the world quite like love. The exhilaration of romantic love is so captivating that it naturally leads to the question of marriage. A starry-eyed couple seems to reason, if this feeling is so neat, why don't we spend our lives together? So they begin making plans for the wedding. Just a couple might believe this, and then it's 3 pages of this story about this couple. They get married, they have their relationships, but almost from the first day of their honeymoon, something changes in their relationship. They wonder silently whether it's what they really wanted, or whether they just made a hasty decision. They get home from the honeymoon, a big fight happens. The husband left home for 2 hours, and the wife called her mother. From then to the bitter end, we see 2 extremely angry and unhappy people who cry themselves to sleep at night. What's worse, they may have produced another member of their family at that time. This toddler will grow up in a broken home and never fully understand why daddy doesn't live here anymore. Anything is possible when you lie. Now, obviously, this pessimistic description of marriage isn't accurate in all cases, but it does happen far too often. The divorce rate in the United States is higher than any other civilized nation in the world. That's racist.
Yeah.
Also, it is surprisingly hard to find divorce statistics throughout time, nation by nation. I spent like a whole 5 minutes trying to do it. So I cannot say for certain how true or not this is. And also, there were multiple versions of this book released, so I don't know what he's talking about. The United States did have a relatively high divorce rate because we made no-fault divorce legal. But now, at least, the United States does not have the highest divorce rate in the quote-unquote civilized world, whatever that even means. People are able to choose their relationships more intentionally, and therefore the divorce rate is down.
Yep.
Crazy what happens when you give people choice or consent.
Right.
There's a quiz. Beliefs about love.
Oh, great.
I think it is exactly the quiz from What Women Wish Their
Wives wish husbands want.
that one. I think it's that same quiz. I could not find in my notes. I only took a couple of questions from that, but the questions that I pulled are exactly the same. But let's do it again, just for shits and giggles.
Yay! I love a quiz. It's like a Cosmo magazine.
Yeah. How much has Dobson infected your brain? Brooke, true or false? I believe that love at first sight occurs between some people.
True.
False. I believe that it is easy to distinguish real love from infatuation.
That's a tricky one. I believe it is easy to distinguish real love from infatuation.
Mm-hmm.
True.
False.
Oh.
3. I believe that people who sincerely love each other will not fight and argue.
False.
Correct. I believe that God selects one particular person for each of us to marry, and that he will guide us together.
False.
Correct.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we did go through this. That's interesting.
I believe that if a man and woman genuinely love each other, then hardships and troubles will have little or no effect on their relationship.
False.
Correct. I believe that it's better to marry the wrong person than to remain single and lonely throughout life.
False.
Correct. I believe that it is not harmful or sinful to have sexual intercourse before marriage if the couple has a meaningful relationship.
True, no matter what.
He says false.
Oh, it's shocking.
I believe in www.jpg. We both were like, False, because it doesn't matter if they have a meaningful relationship or not.
I know, that's why it's funny. It's like locked in my brain that way. I was like, oh, I answered that really quickly with, yeah.
I believe that if a couple is genuinely in love, that condition is permanent and will last a lifetime.
False.
Also correct. I believe that short courtships, 6 months or less, are the best.
False.
Correct. And I believe that teenagers are more capable of genuine love than are older couples.
I mean, neutral. False. Like, maybe some. I don't,
Yeah, he also says false.
Yeah. Wait, what was the question before that?
I believe that short courtships, 6 months or less, are the best.
Dobson said false.
Correct. There's something really interesting in here. Let me see if I can find it. So the rest of the chapters is like going bit by bit by bit through this. He says you should not marry before you are 20 years old.
Oh, interesting.
And he's correct about this, teenage marriages have a very high rate of separation and divorce.
Sure. Because you're not a whole person.
You're still developing.
You're still literally a child.
So he cares about science sometimes.
But that's so funny that it's, I don't think Dobson and Joshua Harris would like each other that much.
I don't think Dobson would like most of the people who like Dobson.
Interesting.
I think Dobson, kind of like Trump, feels like he's a little bit above it all.
Yeah.
And like, these are the people who follow me, but like, they pay my bills. But only a couple points from this. Real love or infatuation. He talks about how when he was in college, he would fall in love at first sight and then discard them when they were no longer part of giving him excitement. Quote, the young lady for whom I had gone bananas was merely a prize to be won, an object to be captured. She was usually forgotten about or replaced by the following January.
Damn, Dobby.
It's good self-reflection.
Yeah.
And he talks about how it's different when he met Shirley, his wife.
Yeah.
And that's good. Good self-reflection, but no deeper investigation.
Right.
I can humanize one woman to marry, but we don't need to look at a larger pattern of objectifying women.
Right.
Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about that.
He goes about, gives advice for decision-making, and some of his decision-making advice is pretty good, and largely comes down to give yourself time. So is it real love or infatuation? You need to write it out. You need to see if the feelings are there. Mm-hmm. Sex before marriage. Oh, this is when we start getting to some interesting stuff. This sex before marriage is the bulk of this chapter. He spends the most time on this. And he talks about the risks of sex before marriage, such as the sexual relationship bonds two people physically and emotionally. Breaking up when you've shared your body and soul with someone is profound and traumatic. The emotional hurricane of love feelings in these cases leaves destruction when it's over. Future sexual relationships are damaged. No, incorrect. It also talks about venereal diseases. And I don't know when this got put into the book. Because again, it first came out in 1978. And it was re-released in 2006. There's some releases in between. But at some point of writing, there were two new venereal diseases, herpes and AIDS. He lists them as incurable, which in this moment are true. But then he says AIDS is 100% fatal.
Oh.
Which it is not.
No.
And it has not been for some time, including in 2006.
Right. Are you saying he didn't research something?
It might be shocking to hear. There's good news, though, about sexually transmitted diseases.
Great.
You don't ever have to worry about getting one. If you wait to have sex and be intimate only with the person you marry, and that person waits to have sex only with you, then neither of you will ever contract an STD. The only exception to this is AIDS, which can be transmitted through IV drug use by way of needles and goes on like birth of the mother and stuff. But that's also not true.
No.
Because you can get herpes just by kissing someone if they have a herpes sore.
Yeah.
So he's counting that as sexual contact? We talked about this in purity culture. The line between what counts as purity or not is real blurry.
I thought I told you never to mention purity ever again.
It will come up forever in our relationship now.
Purity balls.
Holy bone.
Let's sing it together once.
Holy bone.
Why don't you come and get my holy... Okay.
Holy bones and biblical manhood.
We serve holy bones at the biblical manhood. Okay.
I've ever told you I have a drag king character.
You do?
Mm-hmm. His name is Johnny Coxville.
Oh my god, amazing.
He's a white trash vampire. And I feel like I have to incorporate biblical manhood or holy bone or something in there.
Have I ever told you that I have a drag king character?
You haven't.
His name is Paul Bear, and he's a lumberjack funeral director. And my friend bought me a cameo from Landon Cider, and Landon Cider said it was a great name.
That's incredible.
Yeah. No one can steal it. It's copywritten.
Submitting the patent right now. It's intellectual property. Okay. Short courtships. You were interested about this part. You must give yourself time to know your feelings, to let them rise and fall naturally before they can be interpreted properly. That's good advice.
Yeah, that is. Is this book good?
No.
Just kidding.
But I do think it's the least objectionable Dobson book.
Okay. Great job, Dob.
Yeah. It turns out when you're giving basic medical advice to teenagers, you can fuck it up, and he does, but a lot of it is pretty straightforward.
Yeah. But also, anyone could write that.
Yes.
It's not like earth-shattering advice.
Yeah. The chapter we skipped over, spoiler alert, is the sex chapter. And we're going to talk about it at the end. But while I was reading his descriptions of things, I was thinking evangelicals would go fucking crazy if I wrote exactly the same words.
Right.
Because that would be like, oh, why are you talking to kids about sex? You're grooming them. Da-da-da-da-da-da. When Dobson does it, it's fine. It's good. No worries.
Yep.
Chapter 5 is a notion called emotion, which is Dobson helping kids understand that their emotions are going to change when they're in adolescence, which is true. Dobson tells the story, this is a very sad story, of the day he found out his childhood dog died. Quote, "It is most important to understand that there have been many more significant moments in my life. There have been more meaningful days and certainly greater losses. However, there have been few sadder days even to this moment. Why? Because I was 13 years old when the dog died. That made it so much worse." Which is true.
Yep.
So he has 6 characteristics of emotions during adolescence that he wants to give to people. 1 is the cyclical nature of emotions. Some days you feel good, some days you won't feel good. Those things are temporary. That's true.
True.
Unreliable impressions. Some impressions might lead you to get married, or to move to town, or to quit school, or join the army. When these strong thoughts and feelings come, just remember that God rarely makes demands that require instant change. Give yourself a few days or weeks to look at all of the issues.
True.
Yeah.
Also, I really like the folksiness of move to town.
Move to town. Move to another town.
Oh, there we go.
The font is so small. You will want to move towards independence. He calls it a declaration of independence. That is a normal fight between you and your parents. Sure.
True.
You're no longer mommy's baby. This is such a tangent. Consistently, he spells mommy, M-O-M-M-I-E. And I don't know why, but that, gives me the big ick.
Oh, me too. But why?
I don't know. It is in multiple books. He's done it before,
Do you know what it smacks of? It smacks of Pence calling his wife mother.
Oh my God, you're right.
Blech. Just there's nothing that gross about it, but it's gross. I think because that might be what he called his mommy. Dobson called his mommy, they spelled it that way.
Yeah. It feels both adult and childish at the same time.
It feels dark somehow.
Yeah. Age of confusion, you will need to ask questions of yourself of things you've taken for granted and search for identity. Quote, "One more comment needs to be made in regard to your search for identity, that it has to do with finding the proper masculine or feminine role.
Ugh.
Those differences are not as clear today as they were when your parents were children, and many young people have a very hazy sexual identity."
Okay.
Well, I have a really good book called What Does the Bible Say About Transgenderism that breaks down biblical manhood really well.
Biblical manhood.
Ooh.
Every night but Monday.
Now,
Yeah.
I will say, we talk a lot of shit about their ideas of gender, and I think rightfully so. I am not against men being men. I think we need to investigate what those things mean and the assumptions therein, and women being women, sure. But gender can be a way that you understand yourself and how you fit into communities and societies. And I think having even gendered rites of passage can be a good thing. Having role models who reflect what you look like and want, great. It's when it comes at the exclusion of other parts of yourself, because I'm masculine, that means I can't have any femininity in me.
Right.
That's when it becomes particularly toxic.
Yeah, this is what we say every podcast. Is do whatever you want, as long as you're not hurting anybody. Have autonomy. Be whoever you feel that you are. And don't push your shit on other people.
Yep.
That's the moral of every single book here.
I feel like we're such libertarians. So chapter 6 is the last like big chapter. We have one more to talk about, but this is an open discussion with teens. Quote, I invited 2 boys and 2 girls, all 15 or 16 years old, to come to my house for the purpose of recording discussions about topics in this book. The result is an eyewitness account of what it feels like to grow up. I'm not against this in theory. It's like, hey, I'm old. I went through adolescence a while ago. What is it like to go through it now? Sure. But I find this chapter to be painfully boring.
Okay.
I don't have very many notes, but I do have one. I guess I have 2. A kid mentions, quote, my mom once told me that beauty is something that grows inside of you, and that some people who are pretty on the outside don't have the time to work on their personality and character. Later on, those who are less attractive may become even happier because their inner beauty increases as they get older. It's like parental advice, sure, whatever. Dobson says, I wish everyone knew that. I saw another study, no citation, that tended to prove what you said. Readers, put your like researcher hat on for a second as you hear this. Tell me your first impressions. The researchers identified the girls in college who are the most beautiful and those who are the least attractive.
That was nice of them.
They then studied them for 25 years to see what happened to their marriages in later lives.
Can you imagine being part of that study?
Believe it or not, those who were less attractive tended to be more happily married 25 years later.
What if somebody was like, hey, we'd like to do a long-term study on you because you're so ugly. Yeah. You're the ugliest person in this whole school.
We're doing a study on hotties and uggos.
We want to track how your ugliness affects you through your life. No, thank you.
First of all, this smells like bullshit.
Yeah.
How do you operationally define most attractive and least attractive? Are you talking like symmetry in the face? Was it just the researchers like subjective being like, ooh, girl, she's a 10? Like what? Perhaps not surprisingly, I couldn't find any evidence of anything like this existing.
Of course not. Because this is totally ridiculous.
Again, a parent giving this advice to their kid to like help them like cope with the fact that attractiveness is subjective and you might not always be the most attractive person. Sure, that's fine. But Dobson being like, yes, and I read a scientific study one time.
No, you didn't.
No, you didn't.
They could because that's not science.
That's not science.
Because you can't start with a known variable, right? If you said we tracked blue-eyed people and brown-eyed people, fine. But like, there is no like, what is attractive?
Right. I spent way too long trying to find any study that's even a little bit. I used all of my like Google Scholar. I used my like backdoor access into university papers. Like there's not
because it never happened.
Single thing about that I could find. Reader, if you can find the study, let me know. I'd be fascinated to read that study.
Yeah, actually I would too.
I want to know the methodology.
Yeah.
I want to know the reports.
I want pictures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eventually, 2 other adults come in to the conversation because they just can't help themselves. One is a guy who was hooked on drugs, and the only thing he claims to have done was marijuana, which, cool. The other person says, quote, I've learned that God made everybody the way they are for a reason, and he doesn't make mistakes. I know a girl, for instance, who has to wear crutches. She has some kind of crippling disease. I don't know what it's called. But her legs are very thin, and she can't walk on them. Nevertheless, that girl's one of the most beautiful people I know because she shines inside and out.
Oh, this is so gross.
Disability porn, yeah. I have mentioned before, my younger brother has a number of disabilities.
Shout out Tyler.
And one of my mom's sayings, people will sometimes be like, God gives special kids to special parents. Mom's like, how does it feel to know that God doesn't think you're special? Don't say that to people. Don't say any of this to people. Just treat people with disabilities like normal people, please.
Yes.
Intellectually, I know, but working with people who have more visible disabilities really is like, people say the most wild shit.
People say weird shit all the time. Do you know what people say to adopted people all the time?
I can't even imagine. Tell me.
They say, well, you must feel special because your parents really wanted you.
How does it feel to know that your parents didn't want you?
That's all adopted people here, right?
Yeah.
Reader, I am one. It is all you hear. It's like, so the other ones really didn't. Okay, gross. People say weird things. And you know what people say to fat people all the time? They talk about how your personality, they talk about your really nice face, like all this stuff. And I'm like, what about this hot ass?
Right. What about these tiggle bitties?
If you ever say tiggle bitties again, I'm going to walk right out the door.
That chapter ends with Dobson says, God's acceptance is unconditional, even if I'm not the most admired person in the world, which is a good sentiment. But we know from Dobson's work, there's a big old caveat, which is like, if you are gay or trans or not a submissive woman, then it's pretty conditional, actually.
Yeah, it is. But it's okay to be a little ugly.
Yeah. Oh, my God. The final message, Dobson has 3 points. Today is not forever. Normality will return, and Jesus is your very best friend.
Yeah.
2 out of 3 ain't bad. I want to end us today by talking about Chapter 3. Something crazy is happening to my body. There's some good stuff. Dobson's whole thing is, it is not unusual for a teenager to begin to worry about himself. He says, what's going on here? Do I have a disease? Could this be cancer? Is there something wrong with my body? These are unnecessary fears which result from ignorance or misinformation about the body. Preparing for parenthood. Quote, the most important change that you will notice is that your body will begin to prepare itself for parenthood. So again, we're getting into some stuff that relates back to our last episode in ways that I don't totally love. Yeah. But like defining you by your reproductive ability. Now, physiologically, a marker of puberty is the ability to reproduce, for sure. But there's so much more that happens. And so much more richness, especially from a psychologist, I think, that I was expecting, that like the ability for abstract thinking really starts to increase in this time in a way that I think is really interesting. Or yes, your emotions feel all over the place, but you're also able to feel like new, deeper, nuanced emotions in really cool ways. But nope, the most important thing is that you can have a baby now. A boy's new body.
Oh, no.
First, let's discuss what happens to boys. It talks about muscle growth. Second, hair on a boy's body will begin to look more like the hair of a man, the beginnings of a beard on his face. The sex organs themselves will enlarge, become more like that of an adult male. The evidence that the little boy is disappearing forever, and in his place will become a man, capable of becoming a father and taking care of his wife and family. In the abstract short, something about Dobson saying your sex organs become large and therefore the little boy is disappearing forever.
Oof.
Doesn't feel right.
Nope.
This part he calls the beauty of womanhood.
I'm gonna hate this so much.
Contrast these two. A boy's new body versus the beauty of womanhood.
Oh, yeah.
The way a woman's body functions to produce human life is one of the most beautiful mechanisms in all of God's universe. I agree the process of creating life is incredible. But in the broader context of Dobson's work, this feels very objectifying and like reductive.
Very objectifying. Also, it's other things besides beautiful, like incredibly painful.
Yeah.
And it's a lot.
I do not mean this in the like misogynistic way. It's kind of gross. Bodies are gross. Like, we don't have to like be weird about it, but like,
yeah.
He does say, though, I feel it's very important for boys to understand this process too. Although they are seldom informed of it properly. Yeah, boys do need to know the process, just like human bodies and how they work. The growing life. If a girl doesn't become pregnant that month, then the uterine blood is not needed. It is released through the walls of the uterus and flows through the vagina, that special opening through which babies are also born. About periods, it usually takes 3 to 5 days for the blood flow to stop. And during this time, she wears a special kind of pad to absorb the blood.
Shirley wrote this.
Also, no tampons?
Well, what year was it?
2006.
Oh, true. To be fair, though, usually girls don't start there.
Sure.
But, yeah, a special kind of pad.
A special kind of pad. The thing that really got me was that special opening.
Ew, it's so gross. I mean, it's not gross. He's just being so gross about it.
Yeah. Also, I'm not mad at this, but it is notable that if we're talking about this guy who cares so much about Bible literalism, There's no mention of being unclean
Right.
during period times, which is something, especially Old Testament law, cares a lot about. I'm glad it's not there, again, to be clear, but
Yeah.
he's going way scientific and not very biblical, and that feels really notable.
I also really am interested in the fact that he reiterates over and over that is specifically just for a baby to come out of.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's what it's for, and that's all. He doesn't say that about the boy's penis. Like that's for baby making.
Mm-hmm.
But the woman's like, that's what it's for, and that's it. That's the only thing it is.
Mm-hmm. The most beautiful aspect of this incredibly complicated system is that it all works automatically within a woman's body. It's almost as though the master designer himself was standing nearby, telling her what to do next.
Oh, yeah, it's real beautiful.
You're going to love this next part. Menstruation is not an awful event for girls to dread. It is a signal that the body is preparing itself to cooperate with God in creating new life.
Menstruation is an awful event for a girl to dread. It sucks so bad. Whether you are 12 or 40 or whatever, menstruation sucks.
You do not have to take in the misogynistic, ew, beards are gross, kind of thing.
No.
You also don't have to like it.
It doesn't have to be beautiful.
No.
And it's not about it being gross and disgusting. It's about the fact that it is painful. It's annoying. It is limiting.
Expensive.
It is expensive. And it is the thing people use against you if you ever have like a feeling or a thought.
Mm-hmm.
Ugh.
Yeah, God forbid. Talking about sex now, explicitly. The sex appetite. Some new chemicals in your body will begin to develop a brand new appetite when you're between 12 and 15 years old. This will not be a craving for food, but will involve a matter called sex, or the male or female parts of your nature. Which again, reducing gender just to the ability to fuck. Every year as you get older, this appetite will become more and more a part of you. You'll want to spend more time with someone of the opposite sex. Eventually, this desire may lead to marriage. Again, gay people catching strays. This is where he says, I strongly advise you not to get married until you're 20 years of age.
I'd strongly advise you not to get married until you're 30 years.
Take your time with it.
Yeah.
Yes. We're going to do just the little bit of hard stuff here, and then we'll end with some fun stuff.
Okay.
Venereal disease. We are having an epidemic of these diseases, and they have a damaging effect on the body if they go untreated. Which, yes, if they go untreated, but he doesn't talk about how to get treatment for them. AIDS, in fact, is 100% fatal. Always. Period. There's no vaccine, no cure. You can get AIDS from one sexual encounter, and if you do get AIDS, you received a death sentence.
Okay, first of all, you can get HIV.
Mm-hmm. What's the difference, Brooke? What's the difference between HIV and AIDS, actually?
HIV is what is passed.
It's the virus.
It is the virus, right? And then it turns into AIDS sometimes.
AIDS is the syndrome sometimes. Yes.
Right. Yeah. You don't get AIDS, and it is not 100% fatal.
No. Again, I don't know when this entered the book because we didn't have...
Well, he wasn't talking about HIV in the 70s, so this had to have been in 2006.
It got reprinted a couple times, so I don't know at which point it got put in. But this version of it came out in 2006. That wasn't true at the time.
No.
It definitely isn't true now. We have things like PrEP, which is a pre-exposure prophylaxis. You take one pill per day, or there's different variations of it. Talk to your doctor. And that will very strongly reduce your likelihood of receiving HIV through any kind of risky behavior. We also have really, really good treatments for it. You cannot cure it yet, although there is actually some really interesting and promising research out there. But if you are properly medicated and you have HIV, your viral load, the amount of virus in your system, is so infinitesimally small that you cannot pass it to somebody else. Mm-hmm. And with that, you will not develop into AIDS. You can live a very happy, healthy, normal life, even if you are HIV positive. And having worked specifically with gay men who are HIV positive, the number one hardship for them is not the medical care from it, although that can be difficult sometimes. It is not taking the medication or the adjustment from it. It's the shame and stigma that comes directly from shit like this.
Yep.
We started getting very effective treatment for HIV, and by proxy AIDS, by 1997. This came out in 2006. It would have been sooner if the Reagan administration gave a single fuck about it. And if you'll remember, Dobson was a part of the Reagan administration.
Yes, that's right.
So if you want to talk about fear-mongering for AIDS and how horrible it is, Dobson, you played a role in that. You're responsible for that. At least a little bit. Very quickly, I do want to take a little bit of a side tangent. There is not a vaccine for HIV, technically, yet. But PrEP, I've talked about it as being like a once daily pill. They have been able to transform it into a shot. The brand name, I believe, is, I always get it wrong, Apritude. And you get a shot once a month, and that's like taking your PrEP pill every day. And I, who care about science, cannot say it eliminates your chance of getting HIV, but it significantly reduces that chance and that ability. We're talking like over 95% reduction. It is not a death sentence. It is not always fatal. Do not let this kind of bullshit scare you.
Yep.
The sin of impurity. Quote, I believe the sin of premarital sex is especially damaging to the person who engages in it. He or she loses the innocence of youth and sometimes becomes hard and cold as a person. It is likely to affect his or her later marriage because that sexual experience, which should have been shared with just one person, is not so special anymore. More than one person has had a sample of it. Gross.
Gross.
Also, as a person who has had sex with at least one other person besides my primary partner, the way that I have sex with my primary partner is very different from the way that I have sex at the bathhouse. It can still be special and unique and something that the two of you share, even if you have engaged or continuing to engage with it with other people. He's just wrong here.
The bathhouse.
That's the difficult part of this. Now for some weird, we'll say fun stuff. Self-stimulation.
Yeah.
Dobson is pro-masturbation.
What?
Quote, it is my, and he emphasizes this real hard, it is my opinion that masturbation is not as much of an issue with God. It is a normal part of adolescence, which involves no one else. It does not cause disease. It does not reproduce babies. And Jesus did not mention it in the Bible. I'm not telling you to masturbate, and I hope you won't feel the need for it. But if you do, it is my opinion that you do not need to struggle with guilt over it.
Okay, Dobbs. How do you think parents responded to that?
I don't know. It's interesting, though. The arguments he uses, it doesn't cause disease, it doesn't produce babies, and Jesus did not mention in the Bible. Those are things people talk about with, for instance, trans stuff.
Uh-huh.
We've talked about this before. He has a lot more empathy for people with whom he can identify.
Uh-huh.
So I think he was a teenage boy who was jerking it and was like, no, I didn't feel guilty about it.
I think he's still jerking it.
There's a question and answer in this, if you can believe it. There's 12 questions that he lists. Some are fine. Like, does this pain in my breast mean that I have cancer? That's a good question. And the answer is no. Breasts sometimes get sore during adolescence. For people of all genders and biologic sexes, that's fair. Some are less fine. What if someone pressures me to experiment with homosexuality?
Oh, no.
A homosexual is someone who's attracted not to the opposite sex, but is attracted to someone of the same sex. Again, emphasis is being his. A boy who's interested in boys or a girl who's interested in girls. Homosexuality is an abnormal desire that reflects very deep problems. It doesn't happen very often, and it likely won't happen to you.
Only all throughout history, in every culture.
So helpful! Talks about wet dreams, nocturnal emissions.
Yes.
The fluid is called semen and contains millions of cells so tiny you can't see them. One of these cells could become a child if it were injected into a female and combined with her egg cell.
Injected.
Good answer, but like weird way of saying it.
You know what my friend said recently that has stuck with me? We all won the race.
We sure did.
That is powerful. I'm so proud of myself.
Go us.
Good job, sperm me.
Also, good timing for the egg cells, too.
Yeah. Well, you know what? It's about me winning.
You're right. It is. I was going to
But
say...
I'm also the egg, and that egg won too.
Yeah.
So I won twice.
Exactly. That was my point.
Yeah.
The last quote that I want to give is under the title, Plain Talk About Sex. And let's just hear how Dobson explains what sex is to people.
I can't wait.
Sexual intercourse is the name given to the act that takes place when a man and woman remove all of their clothing, usually done in a bed, and the man's...
I don't know why that was so funny.
And the man's sex organ, parentheses, his penis, becomes very hard and straight, which it's not always straight.
Very hard.
He puts his penis into the vagina of the woman while lying between her legs. There are other positions that are available. They move around until they both have some kind of tingly feeling called an orgasm, which lasts for about a minute or two.
What? A 2-minute orgasm. Can you imagine? You just stick it in and move around a little bit, and then you have a 2-minute orgasm.
I don't know. Sure, whatever.
Watching this sex therapist listen to the James Dobson's version of sex is so funny. You're me right now. You're like in so much pain.
There's just so many better ways to accurately describe what happens here.
And like age appropriate.
Yes,
still.
yes.
But
like, first of all, the fact that not everyone has an orgasm every time I think is important. But two, for people who are, well, he says like 10 to 12 or 10 to 15, you don't need to talk about like the best methods to give your partner an orgasm. Sure. But most women don't have an orgasm just through penetrative sex.
right.
Whatever. It's the like moving around, have a tingly feeling that lasts 2 minutes. That's really got me here.
That's incredible. 2 minutes.
I realized,
I think he meant to say it all happens in 2 minutes.
I know I just pulled like specific quotes here.
Yeah.
But he largely uses really correct medical information when talking about medical stuff. So it's really weird to me that in like the sex talk, he like doesn't and uses not euphemisms exactly, but kind of like hedges his language to be like a tingly feeling called an orgasm.
Even like his sex organ or penis, I'm like, just say penis.
Yeah.
Just say penis, James.
It doesn't need to be parenthetical. This book was written for kids and has a good amount of medical information that's not super objectionable. It's not his worst book by far, even as it is part of a broader framework that does distill people down to their fuck parts and relies heavily on fear-mongering about sex. Instead of being fuming mad while writing this episode, my main feeling was, this guy is such a dweeb. Like, if we went to high school together, sometimes bullying is okay, and I absolutely would have tried to shove him into a locker. Even as he is a dweeb, Brooke, I still hate James Dobson.
I hate dweeby old James Dobson. But I love 2-minute orgasms.
Honestly, drop that book. I'd be really interested in that.
Yeah, that's the book we need, James. Get with it.
Oh. Reader, I hope this provided you with a little bit of levity and a little bit of delightful cringe in a very weird time. And yeah, we'll see you in the next time around when we'll have more clarity about what the fuck is going on in the world.
Yeah, we will.
Until then, take care. Love you very much. Drink water. Hug a puppy. I don't know why I'm stuck on that. Hug a puppy.
You are a puppy and you want some hugs.
Maybe. I Hate James Dobson is Labor of Love. Written, recorded, edited, and produced by me, Jake. I'm honored to be joined by my amazing co-host, Brooke. If you're enjoying the show, please consider rating and reviewing it. And if you want to connect with us more, you can find us on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube at I Hate James Dobson, and on Twitter at I Hate J Dobbs. If you want to email us, you can do so at ihatejamesdobson@gmail.com. Special thanks to Drew, Lindsay, DJ, and Jack. Our theme music is by Mood Maze, and the song is called Trendsetter. Thank you for enjoying our show. Hello.
It's fine. Ignore the bottles. stay in. And I want to give the readers a little context, which is that we often have a little nip of whiskey in our podcast recording. Truly not that much. We make it sound like bigger than it is. But today Jake brought the bottoms of 2 bottles.
I have just moved. And both me and my partner had the same type of whiskey that I used for this, but it was just like a little swig at the bottom of the bottle, and both of them, which isn't enough for anyone.
No, thank you.
Thank you. So there are 3 bottles of whiskey.
So we just heard the cleaning people at our office come to take out the trash. They've done this before when we've been recording, and we threw the empty bottles in there. And now they think we're just 2 drunks hanging out in a therapy office.
They said it's like a bar.
Yeah, I need you to really leave in the part where I said, ignore those bottles.
I don't know what I'm going to leave in or cut, but I'm going to forget about this until I start editing it.
It's going to be so fun for you.
It's going to be a neat little treat.
And I really want everyone to know that there was 2 bottles in the trash and one just sitting on the floor full. Oh, that's going to be great.